They called him the Devil of Seoul. Jin Min Ho didn't have a heart, he had a block of ice where it beat. His mansion was a fortress, and his rules were law. Rule number 1, no strangers, ever. But on a stormy Tuesday, Zara, his terrified maid, had no choice. She brought the only family she had left, her grandmother, Edna, into the lion's den. The heavy oak doors swung open. Rain hammered against marble floors. Zara's heart stopped as she heard his footsteps echo through the hallway, steady, deliberate, merciless. Jin Min Ho appeared, blood still fresh on his knuckles from whatever nightmare he'd just walked away from. Zara squeezed her eyes shut, pulling her grandmother close, waiting for the gunshot that would end them both. But the sound never came. Instead, she heard something impossible, the rustle of expensive fabric hitting the floor. When she opened her eyes, the most dangerous man in the city wasn't holding a gun. He was on his knees, his head bowed low before her grandmother. And on his face, for the first time anyone had ever witnessed, were tears. "Halmione," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you're alive." Why would a ruthless Mafia don bow to a humble grandmother he supposedly never met? What is the secret connection between them? What do you think is going to happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying the story, comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Zara's phone buzzed at 3 a.m., shattering the silence of the servants' quarters. Her heart lurched as she saw the nursing home's number flashing on the screen. "Miss Zara?" The nurse's voice was frantic. "The basement's flooding. We're evacuating everyone, but we don't have enough space in the temporary facility. You need to come get your grandmother, now!" The phone nearly slipped from Zara's trembling hands. She had nowhere to take Edna. Her tiny apartment had been condemned last month, black mold in the walls. She'd been sleeping in the mansion's staff room ever since, grateful for the bed, but terrified every single day. And now this. She threw on her coat and raced through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul. By the time she arrived at the nursing home, water was seeping through the corridors and elderly residents were being carried out on stretchers. Edna sat in a wheelchair by the entrance, looking small and confused, clutching her worn leather handbag. "Nana," Zara whispered, kneeling beside her, "we have to go." "Where are we going, dear?" Edna's eyes were cloudy, lost somewhere between present and past. "Somewhere safe," Zara lied, her stomach twisting into knots. The drive back to the mansion felt like a funeral procession. Every red light was a countdown to disaster. Every turn brought them closer to a house where strangers weren't just unwelcome, they were eliminated. Jin Min Ho had made that crystal clear 3 months ago when a lost delivery driver accidentally rang the service bell. The man left in an ambulance. Zara parked in the back alley, her hands shaking so violently she could barely turn off the engine. She helped Edna out of the car, supporting her grandmother's frail body as they crept through the service entrance. The kitchen was dark and empty. The other staff wouldn't arrive until dawn. "Just for tonight," Zara whispered to herself like a prayer. "Just until I figure something out." Zara had 3 guest rooms to clean before sunrise, Mr. Jin's orders. She glanced back one more time at her sleeping grandmother, then slipped out into the hallway, closing the door as quietly as possible. She worked faster than she'd ever worked before, her mind racing through impossible solutions. Maybe she could find another nursing home by morning. Maybe she could... A sound froze her mid-motion. Footsteps, slow and unsteady, coming from the direction of the servants' quarters. No, no, no! Zara dropped her cleaning supplies and ran. When she rounded the corner, her worst nightmare materialized before her eyes. Edna was wandering down the main hallway, humming softly to herself, her fingers trailing along the expensive wallpaper, heading straight toward Jin Min Ho's office. The front doors exploded open with a force that shook the chandelier. Jin Min-ho stormed into the mansion like a hurricane made flesh. His black suit torn at the shoulder, blood splattered across his white shirt. His knuckles were raw and bleeding, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. Behind him, 6 bodyguards filed in, their faces grim, their hands hovering near concealed weapons. Whatever had happened tonight had been brutal, the kind of brutal that left bodies behind. "Get the doctor," Jin barked at one of his men, "and burn these clothes." He stopped mid-stride. The main hall was supposed to be empty. It was always empty when he came home. That was the rule. No staff, no witnesses, no one to see the monster when he shed his human mask. But someone was sitting in his leather chair. An elderly black woman with silver hair twisted into a neat bun, wearing a faded floral dress that had seen better decades. She was humming, soft and melodic, a lullaby from a time long forgotten. Jin's hand went to his waistband, fingers closing around cold steel. Who the hell? The bodyguards moved instantly, weapons drawn, laser sights painting red dots across the old woman's chest. The metallic clicks of safeties disengaging echoed through the marble hall. Edna looked up, blinking slowly as if she'd just noticed the armed men surrounding her. She smiled, warm and gentle, completely oblivious to the danger. "Oh, hello, dear. I was just resting my feet." "Get down," one of the bodyguards shouted. "Nana!" Zara's scream tore through the tension like a knife. She came running from the hallway, her cleaning apron flying behind her, tears streaming down her face. She didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't care about consequences. She threw herself over her grandmother, wrapping her body around Edna like a human shield, her arms spread wide. "Please," Zara sobbed, looking directly at Jin Min-ho. "Please don't hurt her. She has dementia. She doesn't know where she is. The nursing home flooded, and I had nowhere else to take her. Please, Mr. Jin, I'll leave tonight. I'll disappear. Just please don't hurt my grandmother." The hall went deathly silent. Jin stood frozen, his weapon half drawn, his eyes locked on Edna's face, who was now patting Zara's head gently, confused by all the fuss. "It's all right, dear. No need to cry," Edna murmured. The bodyguards waited for the order. One word from Jin Min-ho and this would be over. Clean, simple, permanent. Zara squeezed her eyes shut, pulling her grandmother closer, whispering prayers in a language that felt too small for this moment. She waited for the gunshot. But instead, she heard something impossible. The soft thud of expensive fabric hitting marble. Zara's eyes flew open. Jin Min-ho was on his knees, his weapon discarded, his hands trembling as he stared at Edna's face. And for the first time in his life, tears were streaming down the devil's cheeks. "Halmione," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're alive!" The bodyguards froze, weapons still trained, fingers still on triggers. They'd never seen their boss cry. They'd never seen him hesitate. And they certainly had never seen him disarmed by an old woman in a faded dress. Jin raised one hand, a small gesture, barely a movement, but absolute in its authority. The red laser dots vanished, weapons lowered. The men stepped back, confusion rippling through their ranks like a shock wave. Zara remained frozen over her grandmother, her mind unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. The devil of soul didn't cry. He didn't kneel. He didn't... "Min-ho?" Edna's voice cut through the silence, soft and wondering. Jin's breath hitched. He stared at her face with an intensity that bordered on desperation, as if he was trying to memorize every wrinkle, every silver hair, every detail he thought he'd lost forever. Edna squinted, leaning forward slightly in the leather chair. Her cloudy eyes studied him, and then something shifted in her expression, a flicker of recognition breaking through the fog of dementia. She tapped her wooden cane against the marble floor twice, a gesture both gentle and reprimanding. "Look at you, Min-ho!" Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 disappointed meals. "You still haven't eaten properly." The words landed like a bullet to the chest. Jin's cold expression, the mask he wore like armor, the face that had ordered executions without flinching, shattered completely. His jaw trembled, his shoulders shook. He bent forward into a full 90-degree bow, the kind reserved for royalty, for gods, for people who owned your very soul. But even that wasn't enough. His knees hit the marble floor with a crack that made the bodyguards wince. He crawled forward, his expensive suit dragging across the polished stone until he reached Edna's feet. He buried his face in her weathered hands, his entire body racked with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient, a place where he'd buried a version of himself that no one in this city knew existed. "Homioni," he choked out between gasps. "I looked for you. For 15 years I looked for you. They told me you were dead. They told me everyone was—" "Shh, shh," Edna murmured. Her fingers instinctively moved to stroke his hair the way she must have done a lifetime ago. "I'm here now, child. I'm here." Zara's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The bodyguards stood like statues, their faces carefully blank, trying desperately to unsee what they'd just witnessed. Because the man weeping at an old woman's feet wasn't the devil of soul. He was just a boy who'd lost everything. And somehow, impossibly, he'd just found a piece of it back. Edna looked up at Zara with those cloudy, confused eyes, then down at the man sobbing into her hands. "Do you know this boy, dear?" But Jin Min-ho held on tighter, as if letting go would make her disappear again. Los Angeles, 1995. The alley behind the laundromat reeked of rotting garbage and broken dreams. A small Korean boy, no more than 8 years old, was curled against the brick wall, his arms wrapped around his head as 3 older boys kicked him repeatedly. "Go back to where you came from, stupid immigrant. Your kind aren't welcome here." Little Min-ho didn't cry out. He'd learned that crying only made it worse. His uncle had brought him to America 6 months earlier with promises of opportunity, then disappeared into the city's underworld, leaving the boy to fend for himself. He was starving. He'd stolen an apple from the corner store. That's all it took. Another kick connected with his ribs. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Then a sound like thunder. Crack! A wooden cane struck the pavement so hard it echoed off the walls. The beating stopped instantly. "You get away from that child right now, or so help me God, I will call every mother in this neighborhood, and you won't sit down for a week." The boys scattered like roaches in sudden light. Min-ho looked up through swollen eyes to see a black woman in her 50s standing over him, her cane raised like a sword, her expression fierce enough to stop a stampede. Behind her, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, peeked out nervously. Edna's expression softened the moment the bullies were gone. She knelt down, her knees protesting, and gently touched the boy's bruised face. "Oh, baby," she whispered, "look what they did to you." She'd taken him home that day. Her apartment was tiny, 2 rooms above a liquor store, but it smelled like heaven, like soup and bread and safety. She'd fed him, bandaged his wounds, let him sleep on her couch, while her granddaughter, Zara, little Zara, barely old enough for kindergarten, brought her stuffed rabbit to hold. "You can stay as long as you need," Edna had said, stroking his hair as he finally cried. For 3 months, she'd been his mother, the only mother he'd ever known. She taught him to read English, made him wash behind his ears, insisted he say grace before meals, told him he was worthy of love even when the world said otherwise. Then his uncle had returned, scarred, angry, and dragging Min-ho back to Korea to join the family business. Min-ho had screamed for her, reached back toward that tiny apartment as his uncle's car pulled away. "I'll find you again, Halmione," he'd sobbed. "I promise." But Korea had swallowed him whole. The family business turned out to be organized crime. By 15, he was running drugs. By 20, he was eliminating rivals. By 30, he was the devil of Seoul. And Edna, his only light in a world of darkness, had vanished into the fog of Kime. Until tonight. The transformation happened so fast it felt like reality had fractured. Jin rose from his knees, wiping his face with the back of his hand, and turned to face his head of security, a brutal man named Kang who'd been with him for 7 years. "You aimed a weapon at her," Jin said quietly. Kang's face went pale. "Boss, I didn't know." "You're done. Pack your things and get out. If I see you in Seoul by morning, they'll find pieces of you in the Han River." Kang opened his mouth to protest, saw the look in Jin's eyes, and wisely chose survival. He was gone within minutes. Jin turned to the remaining bodyguards, his voice carrying the weight of absolute law. "This woman is Halmoni. She is untouchable. She is sacred. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me personally. Understood?" "Yes, boss." He knelt beside Edna again, his voice softening to something almost human. "Halmoni, you'll take the master suite. It has the best bed, the best view." "I will not," Edna said firmly, tapping her cane. "I'm perfectly fine where I am." "You're taking the master suite," Jin repeated, but there was no command in it, only pleading. Edna studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but only because my back hurts." Jin's eyes found Zara, who was still frozen in shock on the floor. His expression shifted, became something almost apologetic. "You," he said, "you're her granddaughter?" Zara nodded mutely. "Then your family, my sister." He said it like an oath. "You're done cleaning, done hiding. You live here now. Both of you, properly." By dawn, the mansion had been turned upside down. The master suite was transformed into a palace fit for royalty. New bedding, fresh flowers, a medical alert system installed by the bed. Zara was moved into the guest wing, her new room larger than her entire condemned apartment. The staff whispered in confusion and terror. The devil had gone soft. The world was ending. But the real shock came 3 days later during breakfast. Jin was on the phone, barking orders to a subordinate. "I don't care if he's the mayor's nephew. Break his—" Thwack! Edna's cane connected with the shoulder. "Language!" she snapped. "We are eating." The entire dining room went silent. The bodyguards by the door stopped breathing. Jin Min-ho, the man who'd once murdered a diplomat for interrupting his lunch, rubbed his shoulder and mumbled, "Sorry, Halmoni." "And sit up straight. You look like a street thug." "Yes, Halmoni." Zara bit her lip to keep from laughing. Across the table, even the stone-faced butler's mouth twitched. That evening, Edna made Jin eat vegetables, actually sat there and watched until he finished every piece of broccoli on his plate. The devil of Seoul, terror of the underworld, pouting at steamed vegetables, while his grandmother nodded in approval. "Good boy," Edna said, patting his cheek, and Jin impossibly smiled. From a hidden servant to the sister of the boss, Zara's life changed in a heartbeat because of her grandmother's kindness years ago. Our story is heating up, isn't it? If you were Zara, would you trust Jin Min-ho's sudden change of heart, or would you still be afraid? Let me know your thoughts. Peace, it turned out, was a fragile thing. For 2 weeks, the mansion had felt almost normal, if normal included a mafia boss being scolded for slouching, and a grandmother who'd somehow tamed the devil of Seoul with nothing but a wooden cane and disappointed looks. But the city had eyes, and the city talked. In a dimly lit bar across town, Lee Sang-woo, known in the underworld as the Viper, set down his glass of whiskey and smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "So," he said slowly, studying the surveillance photos spread across the table, "the devil has a heart after all." The photos showed Jin Min-ho helping an elderly woman into a car, carrying her groceries, walking beside her in the garden with an expression that looked almost soft. "Who is she?" his lieutenant asked. "Does it matter?" The Viper leaned back, his mind already calculating angles. Jin Min-ho doesn't let anyone close, not in 20 years, which means this woman, he tapped the photo with one manicured finger, this woman is leverage. Zara noticed them on a Tuesday, the black sedan parked across the street, same spot, 3 days in a row. Different drivers, but the same watchful energy, the same hungry eyes tracking everyone who entered or left the mansion. She'd seen enough crime dramas to know what surveillance looked like. Her hands shook as she poured Jin's evening tea. He noticed immediately. He noticed everything now, especially when it concerned his family. "What's wrong?" "There's been a car watching the house." Jin's expression darkened. He was at the window in 3 strides, his phone already at his ear. "Run the plates on the black sedan, northeast corner, now." The answer came back in minutes. The car was registered to a shell company owned by the Viper gang. Jin's jaw tightened. He'd been expecting this, hoping it wouldn't come, but expecting it all the same. Happiness always had a price in his world. That night he sat Edna and Zara down in the study, his expression grave. "I'm sending you both away, tonight. I have a safe house in Jeju Island." "No," Edna said simply. Jin blinked. "Halmoni, you don't understand. These people are dangerous." "No," she repeated more firmly. She reached across and took his hand, the same hand that had broken bones and ended lives. "I lost you once, Min-ho. I wandered this earth for 30 years thinking you were gone. I'm not leaving you again. They'll use you to get to me. Then you'd better make sure they don't succeed." Edna's eyes, clouded with age but sharp with determination, held his. "I didn't raise a boy who runs from fights, and I'm certainly not running from mine." Zara swallowed hard. "I'm staying too." Jin looked between them, these 2 women who'd somehow become his entire world in 2 weeks, and felt something crack in his chest. "You're both insane," he muttered. "We learned from the best," Zara said quietly. Outside, in the darkness, the black sedan's engine started. The Viper was making his move. The attack came during dessert. Edna was telling a story about young Min-ho trying to steal cookies from her kitchen when the first window exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Jin moved on pure instinct. He flipped the dining table, grabbed both women, and dragged them to the floor as bullets chewed through the chandelier above them. Crystal rained down like deadly snow. "Breach! North and east sides!" one of his guards screamed before his voice was cut short by gunfire. Jin's mind raced through calculations. 12 attackers, maybe 15. His security team was good, but they'd been caught during shift change. He was outnumbered and outgunned. "Move!" he shouted, pulling Edna and Zara toward the hallway. More gunfire erupted from the kitchen. The Viper had planned this perfectly. Simultaneous entry points, maximum chaos. They ran through smoke and darkness, Jin's body positioned as a shield between his family and the gunmen pouring through his home. He returned fire without looking, muscle memory guiding his aim. The panic room was behind a false wall in his study. He slammed his palm against the biometric scanner and the wall slid open to reveal a reinforced steel door. "Get in, now!" Zara stumbled inside, but Edna hesitated, looking back at Jin with eyes that suddenly seemed clear, terrifyingly clear. "You're not coming with us," she said, not a question. "You'll be right behind you, Halmoni, I promise." She studied his face, the same face she'd bandaged 30 years ago, and knew he was lying. "Min-ho, please," his voice cracked. "Please, I can't lose you again." Edna stepped inside. Jin reached for the door controls. Nothing happened. He slammed the button again. The red error light blinked mockingly. The door mechanism had been damaged in the attack, probably by the explosion that took out the east wing. "No, no, no!" Jin's fingers flew over the backup controls, but the door wouldn't seal, wouldn't lock. The panic room was useless. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, multiple sets, coming fast. Jin spun, raising his weapon, positioning himself in the doorway. 3 bullets left, maybe 4. Not enough. "Stay behind me," he commanded. 4 gunmen rounded the corner, weapons raised, professional, precise, Viper's best. Jin fired twice. 2 men dropped. The others scattered for cover, returning fire. A bullet grazed Jin's shoulder, spinning him back. He raised his weapon again with shaking hands, and Edna stepped in front of him. The elderly woman moved faster than seemed possible, her frail cane raised high, her frail body blocking Jin from the gunman's line of fire. "You will not touch my son," she roared with a voice that carried 30 years of grief and love and absolute unshakable defiance. The gunman froze, momentarily stunned by the sight of an old woman with a cane standing between them and their target. It was only a second of hesitation, but sometimes a second is all you need. The second of hesitation ended, but Jin Min-ho had already transformed into something else entirely. The devil they whispered about in Seoul's underworld was a myth, a story told to frighten newcomers, but the man who moved in that hallway was the truth behind the legend. He exploded forward with inhuman speed, using Edna's moment of distraction. His first strike crushed a gunman's throat before the man could pull his trigger. The second gunman managed to fire, but Jin had already moved, the bullet punching through empty air where he'd been a heartbeat before. Jin's elbow connected with the shooter's temple. Bone cracked. The man crumpled. But the remaining 2 had regained their composure. They separated, flanking positions, professional execution. One aimed at Jin, the other aimed at Edna. Jin saw it happening in slow motion, the finger tightening on the trigger, the barrel swinging toward the old woman who'd called him her son, who'd fed him when he was starving, who'd been the only light in his childhood darkness. He didn't think. He threw himself sideways, his body crossing the space between the gunman and Edna just as the trigger was pulled. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. White-hot pain exploded through his body, but he didn't stop moving, couldn't stop, not while she was in danger. He crashed into the gunman, driving them both into the wall. His injured arm was useless, hanging limp, but his other hand found the man's throat and squeezed. The gunman's eyes bulged, his weapon clattered to the floor. Jin squeezed harder. The last gunman had a clear shot now. He raised his weapon, aiming at Jin's exposed back. A massive ceramic vase sailed through the air and exploded against the side of his head. The gunman staggered, blood streaming from a gash above his ear, his aim thrown off. He spun toward the source. Zara stood in the panic room doorway, her hands empty, her chest heaving, terror and determination warring on her face. "You don't dare!" she screamed. The distraction cost him everything. Jin released the choking gunman, who slumped unconscious to the floor and moved like lightning. He caught the last shooter's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crack, and stripped the weapon away in one fluid motion. Their eyes met. The gunman saw his death looking back at him. Jin's strike was precise, clinical, final. The hallway fell silent except for Jin's ragged breathing and the distant sounds of fighting from other parts of the mansion. Blood ran down his arm, dripping onto the expensive carpet. His vision swam, but he forced himself to turn. Edna stood exactly where she'd been, her cane still raised, her expression fierce and unbroken. "Are you hurt?" Jin gasped, stumbling toward her. She lowered her cane and reached for him instead, her weathered hands cradling his face like he was still that 8-year-old boy in the alley. "You took a bullet for me," she whispered, tears streaming her cheeks. "Always," Jin breathed. "Always, Halmoni." Then his knees buckled, and the world went dark. Jin woke to the scent of antiseptic and kimchi jjigae. His shoulder was wrapped in clean bandages, the pain dulled to a manageable throb. Sunlight streamed through curtains he didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized him. Where was Edna? Where was... "You're awake." Zara sat beside his bed, dark circles under her eyes, a bowl of soup cooling on the nightstand. Behind her, through the open door, he could see his remaining guards posted at intervals. The mansion was secure. "Halmoni?" His voice came out rough. "Downstairs, terrorizing your cook about proper seasoning." Zara's smile was exhausted but genuine. "She hasn't left the house, refused to, actually, said you'd just do something stupid if she wasn't here to stop you." Jin tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but Zara was already there, helping him adjust the pillows. "The Viper?" he asked. "Your men found him 3 hours after the attack. He's no longer a problem." She said it delicately, but they both knew what that meant. Jin nodded slowly. The underworld would understand the message. Touch his family, and hell itself wouldn't hide you. Footsteps on the stairs, familiar, uneven, accompanied by the tap of a wooden cane. Edna appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with more soup, her expression shifting from concern to relief to immediate scolding. "Look at you trying to sit up. You were shot, Min-ho. Shot because you threw yourself in front of bullets like some kind of..." Her voice cracked. "Like some kind of hero." She set the tray down with shaking hands and sank into the chair beside him, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. "I can't lose you again, not when I just got you back." Jin reached for her hand with his good arm, his fingers, calloused from violence, stained with blood he could never wash clean, gently wrapping around hers. "You won't, Halmoni, I promise. No more running, no more losing each other." He looked at Zara, including her in the promise. "We're family. Nothing breaks that. Not rival gangs, not bullets, not anything." Edna squeezed his hand, tears streaming freely now. "Such a good boy," she murmured, "even when you're being an idiot." And Jin Min-ho, the devil of Seoul, terror of the underworld, the man who'd built an empire on fear, smiled like the 8-year-old child who'd once been saved by kindness. Jin Min-ho learned that power isn't about how many men you command, but about who you are willing to bow down to. Edna's kindness planted a seed decades ago that saved her granddaughter's life today. And that's the powerful tale of respect, tradition, and unexpected alliances. What did you learn from this incredible journey? Remember, true power often lies in the most unexpected places. If this story moved you, hit that like button, leave a comment with your favorite part, and subscribe to Afro-Korean Legends so you don't miss our next adventure. Until next time, stay legendary.